Angel, how will the referendum turn out?
O'Malley, you're a fool.
Why?
The story of King O'Malley's rise from obscurity in America to notoriety in Australia during his epic battle with Prime Minister Billy Hughes over conscription is one destined for the stage.
You're finished, O'Malley. You've won the vote. You've buggered up conscription and you've split the country and you're finished. Why don't you go back to Yankee land where you belong?
Major
I don't
production
have to take orders from you anymore, Mr. Prime Minister.
The cast of 11, it's larger than usual and took hard work to do justice to the story in the intimate surrounds of the Da Vinci Street Theatre.
We all have to work very hard because we very rarely are off the two acts, and we also
conscription
perform
or
during
no
the
conscription.
interval. So it's a big change.
That's their privilege. I've stood with them for 17 years. I'll stand with them
now. King O'Malley opens on Wednesday night for a 4-week season.
Hell that to Buffalo Bill!
Pacific Colliery manager Bruce McKenzie put the Longwall mining case to council as evidence of the company's willingness to provide detailed first-hand information. During a lengthy question time, he stressed that the operation would have unique qualities which meant it couldn't be compared to other mining operations. He said estimates of subsidence suggested the maximum fall would be about 250 millimetres at the centre of the area, failing to 1 millimetre at a peripheral zone. Mr McKenzie was supported by Mining Federation Vice President Jeff Brown, who later said the issue had huge implications.
Well, the mining industry at present is in turmoil. We believe that if Longwall development is not allowed, we can see the shortening of jobs in the district and the early closing of mines, resulting in many, many losses, but not only of the mining industry and the community as well.
Aldermen will meet again to prepare their reaction to the talks, but residents who gathered in strength at the meeting remain sceptical.
One of the most difficult things that we've found we've been going at this now for 9 or 10 months, is getting information. You just find it very difficult to get information which stacks up. You can get information from one body, one authority, try and stack it against another, and they just don't add up.
In 15 gruelling days of gliding over the rugged Mount Buffalo district, the Australian team, already a favourite, soared ahead. Leading the point tally, Newcastle's Rick Duncan, home today in his backyard workshop. He says he was anxious to win the individual title, not only for Australia, but to end a worrying trend in his previous performance, as he slipped from 3rd to 4th, then to 5th. Rick says the home advantage did give Australia an edge.
They set us a course where we had to do turn points and so on, and rather than have to navigate with a map and concentrating on where you're going, you just concentrate on the flying because we knew exactly where we were going all the time, so that did help.
You say that this is one of the longest sets of rounds that you've experienced. Does that make it a very gruelling sort of challenge as well?
Yeah, it did. It made it real difficult towards the end, and a lot of the Europeans who probably don't get to fly these more sort of rough conditions because it's hot and dry, they started to fall away towards the end of the competition.
His biggest threat came from Englishman John Pending, who led the individual tally until an error relegated him to 9th. Rick says the victorious Australians are keen to hang on to the title and will head to Switzerland for preliminary competition before the next World Titles. He says the Alps will be a unique experience.
Yeah, it is quite different. It's like flying in the Alps and you're flying across snow-covered peaks. It's spectacular flying, but most of the guys that are on the team have already experienced that sort of flying, so we can handle that okay.
Last night, between 10:30 and 12:15, 2 officers were inside the station building processing a drink driving charge against a motorcyclist, while outside someone was breaking into their patrol car and removing lock, stock and barrel a $5,500 KR-11 radar unit. And they took everything, not just the highly visible antenna head which fits to the car's side window, but they forced their way into the cabin to get the computer which controls it as well. The search has been far and wide. There has been a door-knock campaign on nearby houses, but to no avail. And the garage across the road, which was open at the time, also saw nothing. The car involved has been taken back to Maitland and checked for fingerprints. Still nothing. Police don't know why it was taken, and even less can they imagine what anyone would do with a KR11. But if you come across a scene like this, apart from slowing down, look closely at the uniforms. And if you are at all suspicious, please ring the Highway Patrol at Maitland.
Only once a year do the nation's top powerboats and skiers make the trip to Lake Macquarie. All up, 112 boats towing 2 skiers each took part in the 80-kilometre classic. It was raced over 3 laps of a course from the Belmont 16-foot sailing club around Pulver Island and back. Conditions were rated as very good today, with some competitors reaching up to 150 kilometres an hour. Some, however, pushed themselves a little too far and came to grief. 4 people were taken to Belmont Hospital by ambulance, however none were seriously injured. Outright winner was My Three Sons of Sydney in a time of 38 minutes 4.98 seconds. Driver was Gary Campbell, with his sons Matthew and Jason on the skis and Donovan Adams observing. It was this boat that towed Tanya Williams to the World Women's title in Sydney last week. My Three Sons made it a double victory by also winning the Under-19 division. Second, more than a minute behind, was Advance, with Super Fortress third.
Mr Cavalier said the Unsworth government had chosen education as an election issue because research had indicated people were happy with the government's track record.
Our anecdotal evidence and the hard science of market research indicate that overwhelmingly parents are very happy with their own child's school. If the election was restricted to the parents of school-aged children, we'd be back in a landslide.
Are there any problem areas in education?
The key challenge at the moment is the very dramatic increase in the numbers in Year 11. It's the greatest single challenge to the system since the Wyndham scheme added a full year to school back in 1967. But our teachers are first-class professionals. They will cope with it, given space and the additional resources that are required.
Will they get those resources quickly?
They are getting them wherever it's required.
Mr Cavalier was in Newcastle to formally open the CAD-CAM Centre at the Tighes Hill Technical College. It's a unique marriage of government and private enterprise which resulted from Newcastle's bid for the submarine contract. Established largely by a $1.6 million gift of equipment from Prime Computers, the centre is located in the small business department of the Tech, providing a teaching facility that's self-financing by taking in outside design work and renting out time on the powerful computer installation. It's been operating for 6 months, concentrating so far on creating an awareness amongst senior management of the economic advantages of computer-aided design and manufacture. An extension of the service will be to locate design terminals in smaller companies which can then tie into the centre's mainframe computer.
And Sammy tells us where the design from
Your job's made easier.
Judges,
Well, David, what do
Newcastle Gallery
you think
Director
of the
David
final
Bradshaw
four?
and new curator
Well,
of Federal
I'm very
Parliament
pleased
House,
with them.
Katrina
First of
Rumley,
all, I'm
had
very
no
pleased
reservations
with
about the
all the
winners.
pictures in the show. I
Ed
think
Rush's
it's
energetic mixed
come
media
up
work
to
Driving Hank
look,
Home was a
to be
clear
a very
choice,
good
as
exhibition,
was
and it
Susie
does
Marston's
represent, I
Oil on
think,
Canvas, The Ballroom Dancer,
of work
Beyond
that's
and
been-
Beginning by Janet
Do you want to
Lawrence
think
joined
about
the
that again?
Acquisitions and Miracle
No, I
by
think
Peter
I'll
Ellis
make
made
up
the
a different
foursome.
answer.
Katrina Rumley says
what
working
do
as
you
a
think of
partner
the
in a
final
judging
four works
didn't
there?
lead to
Oh,
disagreements.
well, I think that...
No, it was delightful. It was easy because when you're dealing with good work, then your job's made easier.
Well, David, what do you think of the final four?
Oh, well, I think as Katrina said, I think the works will fit into the collection very well, and they're fairly diverse works too. I mean, it also represents what I think a fairly important, perhaps new or emerging group of artists.
About 40 artists accepted invitations to this second Show Association exhibition, and judges say this was a better collection. The $10,000 acquisition fund is contributed by Newcastle City Council, but it proved $1,000 short of the mark. The total price of the works is $11,000. David Bradshaw says that isn't a problem. The shortfall will be made up through the gallery's own acquisition fund. The works will be officially open to the public tonight.
Healthcare purposes. Already approved and out to tender is a new renal dialysis care unit, which at present is housed on the 7th floor of the Royal Newcastle Hospital. The $500,000 facility is expected to be completed by October of this year on the southeastern corner of the land. Health Service Chief Dr. Owen James is keen to have the kidney treatment unit moved out of the Royal.
Well, the facility is for those people who can't actually look after themselves well enough at home, but who don't need the services of an inpatient facility like the renal unit at Royal Newcastle. Currently this service is provided on the 7th floor of the Nixon wing at Royal Newcastle, and it seems funny to have a community dialysis facility inside a hospital. The sorts of people to be looked after here are those that need a little bit of help with their dialysis, and it's appropriate to site such a facility deep in the heart of the demographic centre of Newcastle, which is very close to this site.
Not yet approved, but also planned for the site, is a $5 million transplant for the Hunter Regional Ambulance Headquarters, which long ago outgrew its present position in Denison Street, Hamilton, on the corner of Parkway Avenue. While that spot would remain a branch station, 30 vehicles will be housed in a facility which is yet only at the sketch plan stage. However, the new headquarters is at the top of the 88-89 budget priority list. Ambulance Chief, Superintendent Keith Campbell.
Hamilton has just outgrown its usefulness as in the provision of housing for vehicles and for staff, so that we have been looking around for the purpose of establishing a new regional ambulance headquarters, and we had the opportunity of this site here at Charlestown, and it is an ideal location because of accessibility to roads and of course major population growth areas to the southwest.
As well, the Charlestown land would contain a $1.2 million community health centre, housing baby health, community nursing and some mental health services and the like. But that seems to be the furthest off of the three developments. The state members whose electorates share the land, Richard Face and Don Bowman, say the imminent election is purely coincidental, and planning and budgeting for the schemes have been going on for some time.
They've been in preparation for some years. It's going to happen on the law of averages that some things are going to come to fruition, you know, in the middle of the period between budgets. And it just happens that we've had the election now.
And Mr Face, you're happy with the way the plans have shaped up as far as the community is concerned?
Well, I'm satisfied they get over all the needs. That's to say traffic, the problems of putting the positions of the buildings in the way that they don't affect the nearby residents, and most importantly, we have a situation that we retain all the trees.
Greyhound borrowed the scheme from an American company and adapted it to Australian conditions. If a youngster is reported missing, he or she can go to the police and they will liaise with Greyhound to arrange their transport home. A month down the track, the company says the scheme is working.
In New South Wales alone, we've been successful in returning over 20 juveniles to their families, so I suppose at that rate we've got a little over 5 a week.
Inevitably, though, isn't it a system that's open to abuse?
Well, yes, I suppose any system is open to abuse. I'm hopeful that we don't suffer from that too much, and I don't expect we will. I suppose the major safeguard that we have in place is that the child must have been reported as a missing person by his parents or by those responsible for his well-being.
I suppose the obvious question is, what does Greyhound get out of it?
Well, I suppose it's a difficult question to answer. There are a number of things. Obviously, we receive a certain amount of exposure by being involved in such a program, but to be honest, Helen, we did go looking at methods of contributing something to the community in this particular year, 1988, because as well as being the bicentennial year, I might add that it's our 60th anniversary of operation.
While the arrangement certainly makes it easy for a runaway to return home, it can't help youngsters to make a very important decision, not to run away in the first place.
Yesterday, respected Hunter Valley car dealer Highway Motors was inundated with anxious customers whose cars were repossessed at the weekend in the Maitland area. The cars, Falcons and Lasers, were sold as unencumbered vehicles. However, Hertz Finance in Melbourne claims money is still owing on them. The dispute centres around the Singleton-based Hertz franchise, which allegedly bought the cars from Highway Ford using Hertz Finance. Somehow the cars were sold back to the dealer with money still owing to the finance company. Highway Ford says it ran a check on all the cars through the Register of Encumbered Vehicles, or REVs, which is a service managed by the Department of Consumer Affairs. All the cars came up clean. A check of the REVs registered today revealed that Hertz had decided not to list the cars prior to May 1987. Under the law, an unlisted car cannot be repossessed. The strange twist of this story is that while showing up on the register as clear of any other interests, a vehicle some months later can be listed as encumbered. Today, a second local car dealer indicated he was also involved in the story. A car sold by Bennett's of Islington in 1985 was taken from its owner at the weekend too. This afternoon, Hertz was told by the Department of Consumer Affairs in Sydney that any car purchased from a registered motor dealer after the 15th of September 1986 is protected by legislation which guarantees a clear title. The 5 vehicles to be returned immediately were all purchased after that date. 3 others are known to have been purchased before then, and Hertz has promised to respond to the department within 24 hours. Local car owners involved are advised to contact the Newcastle Office of Consumer Affairs tomorrow, as each case will be handled according to the relevant details. Highway Motors indicated today that if this bungle has damaged its credibility as a respected car dealer, it would seek some form of compensation.
The New South Wales Equestrian Centre is committed to breeding and training horses in Olympic dressage, show jumping and eventing. They regard their auction as the most important in Australia. In its 4th year, the auction is still an unfamiliar sight to many Australian buyers, although the system is commonplace in Europe and well established here in the thoroughbred industry. Even so, 500 people turned up for the sales on Sunday, many just to admire over 70 quality horses, all over 16 hands as required for the Olympics, and among them several Australian champions.
We've got some probably the best show jumpers here in Australia for sale. Eventers, we have a horse here which is the Australian 2-day event champion. These quality horses you don't buy normally.
Right. Well, Judy, for the buyers, from the buyer's point of view, the auction system is somewhat unfamiliar to them. How are they adjusting to that?
Well, they're very slow to start with. It is a new system. They're used to going to a private place and trying the horse out and not having a lot of people watch them, and they're not used to having the owner ride the horse under lights in an indoor school with plants and flowers about. But they're becoming very much accustomed to it, and this is the 4th auction. It appears to be going very well.
Buyers who once travelled across Australia to see these horses are still a little hesitant at the auctions, fearful perhaps that the excitement of bidding might inflate prices. But Judy Mitchell says they're becoming more confident, especially knowing that the lots are scrutinised by a vet for quality and condition under strict EFI rules.
I think they're very anxious about that, yes. They are becoming used to it, but it's always very slow. The first few lots, you know, the bidders are looking around, they're looking at one another and seeing who's going to bid next. But after a few minutes, they settle down and they get the hang of it. The auctioneer encourages them, our horsemaster Heath Ryan encourages them, and then, you know, the incitement gets to them, and yes, the hands begin to wave quite well.
As predicted, the bidding started slowly, with 1 or 2 lots failing to reach reserves. However, 8 hours later, the centre recorded a total of $188,000 passing hands, a $40,000 increase on last year. And that figure is expected to grow, especially with new interest from Asian buyers.
Our Asian friends have been competing in the Olympic disciplines much more than they used to. They're discovering that in Australia we do have the sort of horses that they want, and yes, they are beginning to come to Australia and not Europe to buy their competition horses. And this is a market that I'm sure will expand, given time and patience.
According to the Farmers Association, tough action taken by the Grain Handling Authority during a strike at Newcastle's grain handling terminal last week is just what they want to see. Now they want a similar statutory body, the Maritime Services Board, to adopt a harder approach as well. Grains manager Don Wilkinson says he recognises dramatic improvements in MSB management ability, but he says it's not unreasonable for them to achieve a 50% reduction in wharf charges by eliminating restrictive work practices.
We believe that this request is perfectly reasonable. New South Wales growers are charged $1.78 per tonne. In Queensland, they're now charged 99 cents per tonne, and in Western Australia 41 cents per tonne, so that New South Wales growers are already paying 4 times what their colleagues in Western Australia are paying for the same service.
Well, you've made the request, but how are you going to back that up?
Well, we have the list of 99 restrictive work practices which the MSB management has already identified, and I imagine there are a lot more. We believe that if they were to remove these restrictive work practices, they would have no trouble at all in very, very substantially reducing the cost of wharfage in New South Wales.
Is this move deliberately provocative?
We don't believe it's provocative at all. We believe it's a common sense and very sound approach to reduce our costs, because unless the costs of handling and transport in New South Wales are reduced, we will not be able to compete on the international markets.
Do you have any kind of, what kind of support do you have to pursue this?
Well, we have the full support of the National Farmers Federation, and they are currently investigating various legal procedures which can be used to back us up and to reduce the cost of these restrictive work practices.
So it does sound like the first shot fired, and I imagine what will be a long campaign.
Oh yes, I don't believe that we're going to win overnight, that it could take some years before we're successful. But unless we are successful, every Australian is going to have a reduced standard of living.
Now the waterfront itself has been regarded
Good afternoon, I'm Helen Hughes. In tonight's news, a report on the gazettal of land for the Shortland Wetlands. Planning and Environment Minister Bob Carr also announced the gift of 3 parcels of land for the Glenrock State Recreation Area.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
There are no prizes for guessing an election is on. Today it was Minister for the Environment and Planning Bob Carr's turn to visit the region, and the good news announcements fell thick and fast. A Hexham Swamp Nature Reserve has been officially established, including 855 hectares of land. This protects about 1/3 of the Hexham Swamp wetlands.
We think it's going to be a great recreational boost for the people of the region, as well as a boost to conservation.
Who will manage this reserve?
It'll be managed by the National Parks and Wildlife Service, which is what John Price and Newcastle City Council have aimed at for a long time. And I want to praise the City Council for making the land available for the National Parks and Wildlife Service to run as another part of the people's estate. around this region.
Ideally, though, Mr Price would prefer that the Trust here at Hexham manage the reserve. Is there any possibility of that happening?
I'd guarantee the Trust a very strong input into management. I think they'll be delighted.
But Mr Carr's timely visit to the city didn't end here at the Shortland Wetlands. He also had good news for supporters of the Glenrock State Recreation Area. He confirmed the addition of 3 parcels of land totalling 177 hectares. But the best news of the day came from the Hunter District Water Board. The board says Stage 1 of its land transfer should be ready to go ahead by early May. Stage 1 is a 35 hectare parcel of land including the gun club site. The handover of Stage 2, the land circling the treatment works, is dependent upon the completion of construction work. Stage 3, Burwood Beach itself, may not be included for several years because the board must be satisfied the outfall tunnel is working properly.